Welcome everyone to today's webinar from the IWRM group. My name is Sarah and I'm the webinar coordinator from the IWRM group in Water Use Network. Today we are having a webinar with the title The Connection of IWRM, the Terrestrial Water Cycle and Climate Change Mitigation, the Role that Economics and Economic Policies can play by Gabor and Andras. Gabor is from the Water Economics Unit from the Regional Center for Energy Policy Research, and Andras is from the Corvinus University of Budapest. We are all looking forward to your presentation. I don't know if Andras or Gabor is sharing the screen and who is starting to speak, but maybe you start a few words what you're planning to show us today, and then we are looking forward to see and discuss everything with you afterwards.
Okay. So hello everybody, first of all. We worked together with András in many years. After the presentation, we will discuss together with you the issues that you raise. Okay, perfect, good. So welcome everybody. Thanks for interest in our presentation. What we want to deal today is going through these questions that these topics are maybe familiar to you, not necessarily from an economic perspective. And what okay, so just a few words who we are and what we are doing. We are both economists and dealing with the very different water issues for many years, from, you can say, from tap water to flood water. And as an economist, we see a huge gap between how these water problems are managed, even when some expertise emerges from us, or how these issues could be handled, managed from an economist point of view to be a more successful management. So there is a gap here, and that's what we want to cross today in a way that we want to share our thoughts on these issues that are quite familiar to you, but from an economist's perspective. So the main issues of this integrated water resource management from an economic perspective, what are the important elements and how maybe we think differently on them like other practitioners. As because it's a group work, water issues, I think it's very important to understand each other's view and approach. And we will use some slide like this as to summarize what comes next. Maybe it helps to get the line of thinking, and then if you maybe see later the PPT, it will help to think back again. So these will be the main issues coming from the fact that these the problems are here for ages, but this approach is, and we use the expressions of water governance or integrated water resource management to address these problems are, you can say, a few decades old, but not settled in the sense that there is a ongoing debate on them, that what does that really mean, how these things are connected to each other, and whether do we do something different if we want to implement policies on different water issues than other average policies on education, health, or anything else. There is something special here that need other type of new type of policies, or it's just the thing that these policies should be implemented with the same type of instruments, but in a wise way. I think there is a huge ongoing debate on this, and what we see that economics is not widely used in these topics, and even in these policy implementation, which is a problem. And as the to think about these principles and guidelines or rules, we always that integrated water resource management propagates, for example, we always have this problem that something is too detailed even to apply it, or sometimes too vague to apply it. It can't satisfy all approaches. But thinking about participation and the issue of scarcities and the scale, these are, I think, the main points where integrated water resource management want to incentivize new thinking about water issues. That's what we want to think, deal a bit today, think about them in an economic mind of thinking. But I first want to start with that if somebody goes to a hairdresser or an architect, usually have a clear view that what is expected there. But it's not so clear when you want to go to see an economist. So what do you want from an economist? I think it's a huge problem that that is not a well-known issue or a well-known topic, that what our economists are good for a person or a community or a society. And then always comes in these issues of limited resources, but economists then just quickly will suggest to use some market to solve the problem. And then the others say, no, that's what we don't want. Just don't intrude into our problems. We will do what we want. And that's in a way a problem, and it comes from the economics as well, because they can't express what their profession is really used for the others. And if you go to a hairdresser without having a clear idea what do you want with your friseur, or if you go to an architect but you don't have a clear intention of what kind of house you want, then maybe you will end up with a hairdo that the hairdresser think is most fun at the moment, or you end up with a plan of a house where the architect would want to live in, but not you. And this is a way that if a community can't express their issues, then economists will want to suggest their siblings markets, which is a very efficient instrument to allocate scarce resources. But at the same time, these are instruments that need a very strong community oversight, society regulation. And it's a big question that these societies want to deal with these scarce resources should have the ability, the capacities to regulate these markets. Maybe not. And then other instruments are the one that could be the suitable instrument. But this needs communication, discussions about the goals, the problems, the community principles, and so on, that can make an instrument fit for the purpose, location, and in the capacities the society, the community, they want to use them. So that's the thinking that we want to support today, that there are other things behind economics than just having markets in mind. First of all, if you think this the participation challenge of integrated water resource management, not just who to participate, it's a kind of democracy issue, but okay, if the stakeholders are there, how to structure the debate. And if we start here, just an example from the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, this huge research, the use of mangrove ecosystem is example from Central America. That mangrove is a beautiful ecosystem with a lot of ecosystem services that provide to the people who live around them, inside it. You can see them there. Or it can be converted in a way, but still using the same place as some of the services of this ecosystem to housing or shrimp production, or even to crop production to the drier areas. It's a transformation that will destroy the habitat itself. And if we have just a narrow-minded view on this issue, but you can see there will be drivers that will make this ecosystem transformation very, very quick. But here in 1987, the area that was in 10 years converted in a very substantial way. If you look into the economics behind it, what is the value this ecosystem or the use of this ecosystem can provide? There are timber and non-timber products per hectare value. The shrimp farm outweighs heavily. Even there is some from fishery nursery service, but it's still far away. And if you stop here, somebody who don't want to have the mangrove destroyed may start to think that, oh, we should need some education, some propaganda, some legislation to save the mangrove or prohibit developing it, because that's what the market dictates. But if some time passes and you realize that there are other services as well, there are some cyclones on tidal, harsh tidal waves, you realize that these mangrove, can say forests, have a coastal protection value as well, what the shrimp farms or the real estate development destroy. And if you go into more details, you can see that this shrimp farm is not as productive or profitable as it seems without the subsidies. And if you put the pollution cost here as well, that could be abated, even the restoration of the mangrove area, but even without it, you can see that the balance changes. That's the question of economics or the question of drivers of the market, but the question of regulation. How, and not the question of whether some animals are so cute or rare here that should be protected, but it's the question that somebody should pay for the other stakeholders of the same community or the society for the costs they raise on them with this activity, or with the maybe through some insurance costs that raise with this clearing the mangrove ecosystem away. But they just turn the whole issue upside down. But it's a community discussion. And the question is that are these instruments, are these institutions there the community have to have this discussion in place? So this is one example. Structuring the debate between the participants is a thing that economic instruments, the use of methods can help. And this way you see the balance. Okay, if you step further, this was a evaluation based on the ecosystem service approach. And there are some issues or approaches that the economists see in it, but not necessarily all the others. And we are really interested in that how you think about this ecosystem approach, because we think this is a basis that can be a common ground for cross-sectoral interpretation of water issues. And maybe you're all familiar with this figure. We like it very much in our thinking, but it shows, I hope you see my cursor, that the well-being, the human well-being is based on social pillars, but these social pillars are a connection based on ecosystem services that the nature around allocation provide. There are these four, at first of all, three main group of these services: provisioning, regulating, and cultural. And there is a supporting one behind them that provide a basis for all these other services, which can be set as a kind of ecosystem service capital view like that way, because all the other ecosystem flows are based on them. And here again, there is a economic way of thinking that a capital as a value, not in itself, but its value derives on how these other ecosystem flows are valued by itself. These are how a capital is valued. Even if you have a big bunch of money under your pillow, it's not a capital, it's not in use. This ecosystem capital is the natural background that in use for our services that the society uses. So there is this connection. And what is, again, very important is in this ecosystem services and the value of it, that we can stress that the value of the ecosystem services in the form of contribution to human well-being is not based on itself the features of the natural surroundings in itself, but it's an interaction between the institutions, the social capital that a society has, how they can use this natural background to interact with their needs to produce well-being. So this interaction, again, important that we have institutions, and we have a social capital and natural capital as well. And sometimes the social capital is not enough to manage the natural capital properly. And we can't get better off without improving our institutions. So this is the way we think about ecosystem services, looking into the natural and the social aspect of it as well. And if we step one step forward, that what we promised in our title, that we want to connect the integrated water resource management perspective with the terrestrial water circulation as a way to interpret as a frame that we think about land use and water management integration in an economic way. And again, there is an expression that the economists like very much, that there is no free lunch, which means that if we decide between how to use our limited resources, we always sacrifice something if we decide in one way and not or another. And some costs always are attached to our decisions. Maybe we don't know it, but sooner or later these costs will appear somehow. And the big if is that if we realize there are these costs, how can we deal with it? If there is an offer that something is free, you better think about that it can be, how will I pay for it? Not directly, but then indirectly. And this is the way we think about the natural issues as well, that there are allocations and there are some costs attached to this allocation. And this is the way how we see the natural issues as well. And there is a basic allocation if we start to think about the water cycle as an approach to look as an integrative way to look into water and land management issues. That water and solar energy are matched by vegetation. And it's really, you can see it in the smallest scale. There's a plant, you can see on the right side, it has a transpiration. Then its surface is cooler than the area just besides it, and there's no transpiration takes place. And this same feature appears in larger scale in the city, for example, between the covered area and the forested one. You can see this temperature difference, and you can see it in a city scale. What you can see here is Budapest, our hometown. The left-hand side, the degree of soil sealing. From 0 in the hilly areas to 100% in the city center. And on the other one, you can see the temperature difference in a summer, you can say morning, and you can see 15-20 degrees difference in the vegetated areas and the where the no transpiration takes place. And even can see this in a structured landscape as well, not just between urban and non-urban areas. But you can see here is an area in the Czech Republic where, again, in a hot summer day, the air above a forest is 28 degrees. In a wet meadow is similar. A harvested meadow, there is no transpiration, is even around 40. And the asphalt, the covered concrete area is 48. And you can see this difference, what the transpiration, the possibility of transpiration matching water and energy can create. And as we think about this limited resources, what we see is that there is a constrained amount of radiation in a summer day. You can see here this blue line that can be matched or not with water. This is a window of opportunity. If the water is there in the soil, because that vegetation was able to infiltrate it and store it, then this transpiration can take place. So it's a kind of allocation of water, an allocation of the energy of solar radiation that we deal with, both in a way a limited resource in time, both based heavily managed by the land use itself. And that's what you can see here, how land use is a way that manages both water and the heat flow through vaporization or direct heat flow to the atmosphere. Whether the land use we have are able to infiltrate, store, provide this water later on. And the difference is striking if there is this vegetation activity, even in a meadow, as we see, or not. This is the change of heat flow or dissipated heat that is won't create a temperature peak in that area. And this topic of land use management, the way how land use incentivizing water cycling above an area, because it is the element of water cycle. I'm sure you all are familiar with this figure, a picture, which is interesting here that these pictures always are as nice green and blue, which is not the case, sadly, anymore. Oh, sorry. But behind it, there is a more structured process that is transpiration, supply water vapor, not just from the ocean, but from the land itself, that then later on became again precipitation as a kind of recycling. And it's a measure of the ecosystem success, how they can recycle this water. So this water, terrestrial water circulation is all around us, but we really can feel it when we miss it. This is what we miss in this urban environment, that this circulation just ceased to exist around us because the water ran away on the concrete surface, sealed surfaces, and not there when the radiation arrives. And it's a difference in not sealed landscapes with a proper vegetation. And if we put all these things together, ecosystem services, this matching, and we go back to our ecosystem service concept, you see that there is this supporting ecosystem service group, what we describe as a kind of capital. But if you look into it more detailed, what we see that at the Mineral Ecosystems Assessment listed nutrient cycling, primary production, soil formation. These are just the phase of this water cycle, water circulation, from precipitation, infiltration, and primary production is just the complementer of transpiration, which is quite cooling. But the other, as we showed, this is the preventing warming up, that then we can be filled as a cool place compared to the warm one. So this can say supporting ecosystem service group, what we describe as a capital. is a dynamic thing at the small terrestrial water circulation itself. And it's a kind of economic way of thinking that if we can measure the terrestrial water cycle by its volume, not by an economic value, but just as a process, how big, how large it is. We have an approximation about this very basic of ecosystem service provision, the natural basis. And this is the way how we think about integrated water land management on landscape scale, that if you think about the terrestrial water circulation as a way, it's a tool to enhance well-being, then managing this stock, this is the important way to shape the basic stock of the supporting ecosystem services. And if you think it as an indicator of interventions, development processes that have land use effects, if you think about the integrity of the water cycle, the water circulation, then we have a nice sustainability condition that we can, based on quite proper and clear technical measures, not just legal one or human values, like a sacred area, which is sometimes very difficult to integrate into decision making. But as we see it in the case of mangrove, sometimes we don't have to go such far to integrate these difficult elements. We can have a clear picture on our standing and the discussion and the what are the decision points of a community without going into these cheesy elements of values. But here we can have a good approximation of a capital based on technical measures. And because this way we can interpret all these land transformations that are not just allocating ecosystem resources into provisioning ecosystem services, but we are decreasing our capital for ecosystem, for value, human well-being enhancement, because we decrease this capital. And this figure here is from the economics of ecosystem and biodiversity that make this conceptualization a very clear way, that if we transform an ecosystem, then as it goes through some thresholds, it will change. And we still want to provide the same provisioning ecosystem services at that location, but we are squeezed from a less and less resilient ecosystem, which means that if we have a smaller capital stock and we want to have the same income revenue year by year, it means that we are in a ever riskier and riskier situation. You can, I think it's clear from an economic perspective that if you have a smaller capital and you want to invest it and want the same return as a side of income, then from a bigger capital, I have to have a much riskier venture. And riskier ventures more frequently fails. And that's what we have when we start to think about climate change. We see climate change as a global process, but if we start to list out what are the features we are most worried about. For example, urban heat islands or the increase of floods, the destruction of soil and the agricultural problem, droughts. We just can realize that these are effects that are the same way results that we shrink, make the terrestrial water cycle weaker and weaker as we change the land use. Don't let the previous infiltration and storage capacity. So we don't let the vegetation, the ecosystem work for themselves and for us as strongly as could it be possible in that area. And that where our climate effects are come in. So these things are again are interrelated. It's not just adaptation, which is the way how we can manage it through the land use, water resource management, and with this we can mitigate these effects, which is a combined mitigation and adaptation procedure. So this is a way how we, in an economic-minded way, think about this water and land integration using the water cycle as an approach and the ecosystem services. And if we see that land use change is something that have to be regulated much heavily, and we see that what are the drivers we want to implement it, and what are the aspects we want to implement it in land use decisions, then we can start to provide economic measures, economic instruments. And here are some of them that can be very effective if used proper way, if this proper regulation structure is around it, or can fail if these instruments or it is institutions through we want to control them, maybe fail, and feedback mechanisms are not there. Governance is not responsive, not want to include all the information they should have, then it could go to a problem. But it's this way of how to design policies and implement policies successfully, where all these elements from an economist point of view can have real impact, besides other instruments that may have not less efficiency, but maybe can be misused as well and could be much more expensive than these instruments. And just the finishing picture, that when we think about the terrestrial water circulation, and we started from a very small scale and this matching of water and energy, and think about it as the water vapor circulation and vegetation's ability. This is the superstructure, where all these things are connected somehow in a much larger context. But you can see the transporters of water vapor by the vegetation as all these tropical forests just pop up water vapor into the air to this circulation, and provided rain precipitation as a resource to other areas. So this is the way how, which is in a way is a bit far away to use it as an economic instrument. We even couldn't use carbon pricing, but it's something again that from a physical and maybe an economic point of view had some reason. And I think it's the future of the direction integrated water resource management should head on. So this was our presentation. Maybe it wasn't too long. We have some suggested readings for you, but at the moment I decided to stop sharing my slides.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gabor. It was a great, really interesting presentation. I have a few questions myself, but I will be the last one to ask as a host. I have 3 questions, just one from Anita came in, and I have 2 others from the chat that I will just start asking for them.
Okay.
So we have one from Christo. So you suggested a cost-benefit analysis as an economic instrument to add weight to a structural imbalance as problem sets. But how would you make sure that the right parameters are considered by decision makers in the decisions for their future investments? Because many of them are still using GDP instead of like well-being metric that you showed.
Yes, I think that's what we expressed, that these instruments can structure participation, that how to where are the focuses of the discussion, that a CBA is not necessarily the question is that is it a positive balance or a negative balance, but you put it in. But with this, you are make it clear that what are the stakeholders group that are impacted through this development process, and what is their impact in monetary terms. And the big question is that are they compensated or not? And the ecosystem service approach with this can help you map the impacts that include all the impacts that some stakeholder groups are involved by. And then there must be a structure of this negotiation that deal with the compensation, that the one who are impacted in their livelihood production, for example, how could be compensated. And it's a debate. And the CBA is just a starting map, a starting guide for this debate. And the big question is that could this debate take place? Are the institutions there to discuss these issues? And I think this is a big if.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much.
If I may add a sentence, yeah. I think a big part, because the original question was referring to decision making. I mean, how can you convince decision makers that they should go beyond the traditional measures, economic measures? And I think a big part of it is communication. It's not enough to uncover who are affected and in what way, but let them be aware so they can actually start start voicing their opinions and putting pressure on decision makers to actually incorporate their interests, because a lot of it is there. But even if you are able to create a CBA with which also covers some of the ecosystem services, I'm afraid decision makers frequently will simply neglect it unless there is pressure from part of society on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much. There's another from Adinul. So he just texted and said, vegetation, climate change, and water problem is a very interesting issue. But in his country, Indonesia, they are more concerned about deforestation problems that caused limited water catchment areas. So could maybe one of you explain strategies in terms of water pricing, and is there any ecological service schemes or good practices in Europe they can use in Indonesia as well to improve this deforestation and water catchment problem?
Okay, can I start, or you start on that?
But
Okay, so I think I'm always very timid to say that there are some instruments to use in Europe, for example, that should be used in other parts of the world. That I think Europe is very good in promoting their way of dealing with water, but we are in a very present situation, and we even couldn't solve our sometimes smaller problems because I think the same type of problems that what we include, who we include into these negotiations. So if we going back to the question of deforestation, first of all, the effects must be clear. That taking the forest away, that it is that there will be an effect on precipitation in other areas. There will be mitigation, heat mitigation effect around this area. There will be soil loss. All these which can then cause water pollution, for example. So all these elements could be, this line should be followed and find the stakeholders groups who are impacted, and based on these impacts, the cost of this change can start to be accumulated, and this is what most of the these kind of changes would sum up. That if you put all these elements together, then we realize, as it was given this example as well, that if you add up all these costs, then it will outnumber the gains. The problem is that the costs are spread among a lot of people or areas, and the gains are concentrated. But this is what the institutional frame of this community supervision or society supervision have to force through. That that is where people have to be aware that all these changes have an effect on us. It's not something that happens independently of them. That's
So
where there.
goes,
Yes, please.
yeah. So it goes back to communication again with stakeholders who have the money to potentially pay for the ecological service schemes that is needed for specific regions. I assume.
Yes, I think it's a two-way thing. That if you think about improving the ecosystem to have more gains, and there are people who gain from it, and there are one who have to make some changes to these gains can be realized. And there must be some connection between the beneficiaries and the cost bearers, and some financial transaction, because that is a thing that can incentivize the cost bearers that that have these costs be implemented on them, because they are compensated. And the same issue with this deterioration effects, that there must be these connections. The polluter pays principle, for example, is something that have to be in the environmental legislation that then claims can be based on, even if somebody don't want to pay for the pollution. If it's in the law, then the courts, the legal way, can force it out. But again, the question of the strength of the institutions. Which, and I don't want to say that not the market or not the economic issues are the one to blame, but something else. I just want to stress that it's good to identify where is a problem if something doesn't work. So where you want to focus your efforts to improve the situation.
Yeah, but I think one of the key points is what was already mentioned by Gabor, is that there is a small group of people who derive a lot of financial gains out of deforestation, and there is a large group of people who suffer. Everybody suffers to a small extent, but if you add it up, it will overwhelm, of course, the total gains. The problem is frequently that this much larger group of people who will face the consequences of the negative consequences of deforestation, they may not be aware, especially about the longer term consequences, and it is difficult for them to organize so that they can represent a real force against the lobby power and the financial power of the small group of beneficiaries. I think this is very difficult, but if you're able to get through this stage, then I think there's a much better chance of achieving actual results, whether it is the legal system or economic incentives or some other way. But this is, I don't have direct experience from Indonesia, for example, but I suspect that one of the foundations of the problem is that people don't have long-term awareness, or may not necessarily have long-term awareness, and also they're absent of the tools or the skills to self-organize and represent their interests in a much better way. And sometimes the blame is on multinational corporations, that they take advantage of the ecosystem. But in fact, I think a lot of it really happens nationally, domestically, and also I believe that domestic organization and domestic response is more effective than response from the consumers of multinational corporations.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate fight of people who gain money from it and people who actually suffer from it. So maybe just joining on that kind of, when we speak about budgeting and local scales, is the question for Nupur. So can you suggest any budgeting instruments for wetland-based supporting ecosystem services in city or a local scale? And she asked specifically for like cooling and transpiration parts of the land use. Is there anything that is, if we don't think about the big companies, the big stakeholders, they just want to gain money out of it and actually go in a more local scale, is there anything smaller local businesses can do?
So the question was about a budgeting instrument?
Can you suggest any budgeting instruments for wetland-based ecosystem services at city scale or local scale and smaller urban areas?
Mm-hmm. Maybe what in our terminology, what we mean is economic instruments that would provide incentives. For example, in the spirit of wetland credits, in which if somebody is for development purposes replacing a wetland with some other land use, then this person or organization will have to generate a wetland in another location, so that the positive impacts of the wetlands are not ruined for the community. So this type of market-based instrument can be one solution. But other solutions that I can think of, for example, wetlands, besides the cooling and transpiration that you referred to, they they also create other services, for example, cleaning of nutrients from the wastewater flow. So possibly if you can somehow couple creation of new wetlands to wastewater treatment, thereby replacing some of the cost of the wastewater treatment technology, that can be a partial solution to financing new wetlands. But I'm not sure if this is really what you were asking about. Is the person here who was asking? You can also speak up. You don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's just because of speaking up, because of so many participants. We don't want to start asking everything. Everyone. Nuper, do you have anything else, or was the answer okay? If you can't speak,
I think it's fine. If I understand this question in a way that what could be the ways that the city can have advantage of having wetlands. That one was this water cleaning effect. The other one, what we mentioned, that it's again prevent the area warming up, but as well it could have flood risk mitigation services as well. So in a city's design, if you have these areas, then in an advanced design, that these areas can get water in a big precipitation period that prevent the other parts of the city to be flooded. Then it's again something that can be included into the thinking and have a high value service.
Okay, I think the last question, just quickly, maybe some, doesn't have to be the whole picture, but from Anita about the natural water retentions in urban areas. So there's, of course, a framework, natural water retention measures. So for urban planning, so what would you suggest from this gray to green principle within cities? What is the best and easiest to achieve? So Anita comes from Nepal, for example. What is the most effective, maybe even quickest solution for these kind of urban areas?
Well, obviously, you need space for that. You need an area, especially if you are thinking about natural water retention, because you need the vegetation and the soil for that. And it's always a trade-off, because in urban areas, land is scarce, and developers, especially if it's a city which is expanding, developers really value empty lots. So it's a question again of balancing private and public interest, because the private developers, of course, would like to buy that piece of land and make a house, build a house on it. And on the other hand, for the public, a lot of benefits derive from the fact that water can be retained, so there's a lower risk of flooding, and also a green area can be created, which has a lot of advantages, partly covered by the presentation, like reducing the urban heat island effect. So the question, I think, is really on the level of the municipality. Can the municipality ensure that there is a balance between development and other public interests? And this is, I believe, partly a question of municipal budget. If the municipality has the budget to actually purchase the property, and also it's a question of regulations. Sometimes municipalities can issue regulations in which they require that development is accompanied. It goes hand in hand with the creation of new green areas. Sometimes creation of new green areas with some water retention potential. So these are the instruments that come immediately to my mind. Gabor, do you have some other suggestion?
I think what is important when you think about nature-based solution in urban setup, that people, when you start to think about it, everybody had the idea of nice areas and think about what could be the type of vegetation and so on this area. But implementing any of these measures is being the question of providing the space itself and organizing the space itself for this purpose and making the agreements again inside the city, the owners and the local governments, that how the space could be used in a different way, and what are the disputes along these changes. And which is important, that spatial planning is dealing all this type of conflicts previously. I mean, this green approach is something as a new layer in urban, in this planning planning issue, but there is every country has an own tradition in this kind of planning arrangements. That what happens if the government want to build a motorway? These are the same type of issues, and it has a legal frame. And this is where all these things have to start to clarify that what is the public need and how it's embedded in the legislation, and then how in this concrete issue can be used the already existing legislation. But to have a practical aspect as well, I think designing areas to be less prone to flood is very difficult as an issue, because these many conflicting interests of urban land use. What is maybe less conflicting is using vegetation not as green roofs, because it again very expensive, but letting plants run up to the walls, all these flattened barren areas. I think, at least in Europe, I know, but I don't know other biomes, but there are these kind of plants that could be used for it, which is quite costless thing to start with, and in this, along this mitigation, heat, other effects would have very good impacts.
Yeah, but let me just supplement this discussion. That I think there is an increasing recognition that urban green areas are really favored by the population. Earlier, this was not necessarily an issue, but if you're talking about local politics, of course, people will vote for the local politician who is doing favorable decisions, who is making favorable decisions. And we see some evidence that there is now a much bigger willingness on the part of local decision makers to actually spend local budget on green areas or the creation of green areas. I spoke with an expert from Poland lately, and she was describing how a number of Polish cities for the last couple of years started to purchase pieces of land which were up for sale for private development, and the municipality became one of the bidders, and they actually purchased the area so that they can create green surfaces. Same story is going on now in Budapest, which is the capital of Hungary, where we are coming from. There is now an increasing discussion, which was not really here before, but there's a new local government which raised the issue, and there is now an increasing discussion about the importance of creating more green corridors within the city. because simply there is a much bigger appreciation on the part of the inhabitants of these areas. And I think that slowly a lot of municipal leaders are becoming aware of the importance of this aspect, and they are willing to either directly to spend money on the creation of these areas, or to influence the behavior of developers so that more green areas stay available for public purposes. So I think there's actually at least in Europe, I can observe a nice tendency in this direction.
Yeah.
But I would add to it that again, shouldn't think in big. I mean, if somebody is thinking about a park, creating a park, for example, which is could be a very expensive thing to start, organize, and maintain later on. But every unused corner of a street, of a pavement, just to not cover it with concrete and start to have let the plants develop themselves there. And what is important again here, that thinking about big green surfaces will quickly bring in the question of water, that how these surfaces will be maintained during the summer areas when there is no rain. And if this thinking is started then systematically, then it will be realized that the cost-effective solution is somehow storing rain, letting rain infiltrate into the soil, and facilitate these small activities that can build up if it can spread. And this is something that again needs some community action. That
and just the last remark, really. Another tendency that we can observe is that not only rainwater harvesting can supply water for urban areas, especially in the dry season, but wastewater treatment. It is more and more common to use treated wastewater to irrigate or to water urban green areas, which is a constant supply. It is available winter and summer whenever you need it. And the quality of the water is good enough for irrigation, but it may not be good enough for other purposes. So it's actually a fairly good use of this type of wastewater.
Mm-hmm. As a biogeochemist, I appreciate the ending note of wastewater treatment. But I think for everyone still participated in the last hour and 20 minutes, I really would like to thank you both, Gabor, for giving this presentation, and of course Andras also for answering all the questions and giving us an insight of the difficulties of economics. For sure, I learned a lot, especially as someone who works actually in the field without actually dealing with economics. But yeah, it is a complex thing, and there's a lot to learn and a lot to rethinking and yeah, replanning. But thank you so much for your time, for showing us your work and what you're dealing with every day. And yeah, I'm going to share soon the recording with you, so you can also share your presentation with your network. And yeah, hope we can stay in touch and repeat something similar again soon. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining.
It was our pleasure.
Okay, thank you. We think that I hope that you are not more afraid about economics than before. So and you are I just want to incentivize that ask questions about these issues. And if anyone wants to ask something just in private, just write to us, and we will answer.
Yes, I will
and keep in
share your
touch and
email
chat.
addresses.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
if anyone is interested, just get in touch either with me or either one of the two speakers. I'm happy to share information. And yeah,
Great.
have a good rest Thursday.
Thank you.
All of you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.